Welcome into a Thursday edition of First Draft. Field Yates, Mel Kiper Jr., and Todd McShay with you as we are twice a week, every week, all the way through the NFL Draft in late April. But before we get to the draft, we have so much to take in, and that includes the NFL Combine, which is back after last year being removed because of COVID-19. Hopefully we have a much more normal experience this upcoming year. Of course, the event is now a primetime event too, which is really, really cool. But let's spin things forward here to the Combine. Mel and Todd, the names that are going to be at the Combine was recently released. So, Mel, Todd, I'll start with you. If you were to sort of take a stock of this entire group of nearly 325 players, is there a position group that you feel, or position groups that you feel as though really is as strong as any other in this year's class?
I think the edge guys, edge defenders, it's loaded, and it starts up at the top. We've been talking about Aiden Hutchinson from Michigan as a potential number one overall pick since the process began. Kayvon Thibodeau is, to me, from Oregon. Yeah, his stock is slightly shifting here and there. Some guys like him a little bit more than others, but there's no questioning his talent level. He's an explosive straight-line power player out of Oregon. He's going to be somewhere in that, I would guess, 4 to 10 range in this draft. And after that, the depth is what's so intriguing. You've got Trayvon Walker from Georgia, who I think is going to be a better pro than college player. You've got, beyond that, Jermaine Johnson from Florida State, who had a phenomenal week of practice at the Senior Bowl. You see his length and his ability to, with his explosive long arms and ability to get to the quarterback. David Ajabo, who's not a finished product by any stretch of the imagination, coming out of Michigan, but he probably has the quickest first step and has the most explosive burst around the edge of any of these edge rushers. And beyond that, you've got George Karlaftis from Purdue, who's a kind of a power player, can play inside and outside and always around the ball, pressuring guys. Boye Mafe, who we've talked about earlier this week in the podcast, from Minnesota, so explosive, had a phenomenal week at the Senior Bowl against really good offensive linemen. Logan Hall can play kind of inside, outside, 5 technique, however you want to play him out of Houston. And even beyond that, Myjai Sanders is another guy from Cincinnati who's just long and athletic. So I've got, what was that, like 8 or 9 guys right there in my top 50 that are edge rushers in this year's class. There are some other positions. I'll let Mel get to some other ones that jump out to him. But I think if you're not getting an elite quarterback in the draft, the next most important position is pass rusher. And this year's group is loaded.
I'm with you on that, Todd. I think the pass rushers, both inside and outside, some disruptive defensive tackles. You saw Perion Winfrey from Oklahoma and what he was able to do. You saw offensive linemen at the Senior Bowl not be able to block those defensive linemen, both inside guys and the outside rushers. So I look at an Alex Wright from UAB, 6'6", 6'7". Tremendous length, that great versatility. So you're going to be able to get, and we've seen historically in the NFL draft, some pretty good pass rushers have lasted until day 3 or late day 2. Think about where Trey Hendrickson, like a 3rd-round pick, and look what he's doing coming out of Florida Atlantic now with the Bengals, and the list goes on and on. But I think corner is a position where Houston Cougars have a couple guys. And I think the depth at corner, if you try to say who's my top 10, it's hard to separate the 7th guy from the 15th guy. So cornerback provides some depth. Wide receiver, I talked about Sky Moore, Western Michigan, Kyle Phillips, UCLA, Alec Pierce, Cincinnati. I've liked him all year. I think wide receiver, both slot and the outside guys, is going to be a position that creates some opportunities on day 3 as well.
All right, so we got those as the strengths of this year's Combine. Mel, if you were to look at the players, maybe at the position groups that are leaving you wanting more. I think we all agree that quarterback is not as strong this year as it was last year. Is there any other spot that you say, like, you know what, I'm just not totally sold on this group this season?
Yeah, the tight ends this year, there's a lot of them. A couple of them weren't invited to the Combine, and I thought could be in the top 10. But, Cade Otton, Washington, you wanted to see him emerge. It really didn't happen. Kohler at Iowa State, okay, but not the top guy. You really, right now, Trey McBride, Dulcich at UCLA is enough. You're going to look at a lot of tight ends that are going to be more day 3. I think you look at the offensive linemen after the early group. there's a lot of mixed opinion, Todd, on the guys who are going to go in that 3rd to 5th round area, both at tackle, guard, even center depth is lacking. But the tackle guard group, a lot of mixed opinion on those players. Senior Bowl, you saw them being dominated up front for the most part by those defensive linemen. So offensive line, we talked about the Bengals needing 2 to 3 offensive linemen being brought into the fold. Duke Tobin and his staff have done a phenomenal job evaluating players. They need to do so again this year if you're going to bring the right offensive lineman into your football team.
Yeah, I would say running back's another position. I'm so tired. I'm exhausted just thinking about the conversation with Kiper and no first round. Like, when there's not first round talent, yeah, Mel, I'm not going to put a running back in the first round. I'm not waking up reading the Kiper Bible and all of your chapters and verses in there. But to me, this year's class, it comes up short. There are some good backs, but there's not a single back in this class where I say, he's the next Derrick Henry, or he's the, whoever it is, he's the next guy who's going to come in and take the league by storm. There's just not that player. Isaiah Spiller from Texas A&M, really good player. But I think in a rotation, that's where you're going to get the most out of him. Kenneth Walker, the third from Michigan State, he had a phenomenal year. He tore apart that really good Michigan defense. Had some big games for the Spartans this year. I think he's a complete back, a good back, but I don't think he's at that elite level. I think those are both 2, second-round picks, somewhere in that mid-late second-round range. Breece Hall, I like him. He's a grinder, runs low to the ground, yards after contact. But is he going to be that dynamic weapon and a home run hitter? And then you got James Cook and a couple other guys who are more, I want to say change of pace backs, put them in the slot, go catch the ball and create in the passing game. I think Cook's just as valuable coming out of Georgia as a slot receiver or a receiver out of the backfield as he is as a runner. And I think he's a 10 to 12 touch per game kind of guy, but I don't know that he's ever going to be a 20 touch per game kind of player in the NFL. So there's a lot of good players that you can kind of insert and fill a void, but there's no one coming in my opinion, from what I've seen in this class, where you say, all right, we're set at running back for the next 5 years. We locked him up with a 5-year contract as a first rounder, and we're good to go in that area.
Todd, you mentioned Derrick Henry. That's revisionist history. It was a second-round pick. So now everybody, Derrick Henry's great, but Derrick Henry didn't go in the first round. Derrick Henry went in the second round. And a lot
you
of these
got my
backs
point, Kiper. You're always splitting hairs, man.
No, I'm not splitting. I'm giving you facts. Facts are that Derrick Henry now wasn't viewed that way when he came out. If you'd been talking about him then, you weren't raving about Derrick Henry as the next great running back coming into the NFL that should have been a top 10 to 15 pick, but somehow got into the second round. I think Breece Hall's a good football player at Iowa State. He'll be a second-round pick, more than likely. You mentioned Walker, Spiller. I like Kyron Williams at Notre Dame, coming in as maybe a third-round pick. I think there's other guys. You mentioned James Cook's versatility. I think there's going to be some pretty good running backs coming off the board, down the line just a bit. That because of the fact that teams have bought in. And if you look at most of these teams, Todd, they have a couple backs. Some have 2-3 backs that are pretty doggone good. So the need isn't necessarily there. Plus, people have bought into that philosophy that I had, okay, that you should not take a running back in round 1 because you're getting the best out of them early on. After year 3, what's happening, and you saw the big money that some of them got that didn't really pan out and didn't work, to their benefit. And you can get these running backs. You can get them from the second round on every year, Todd. It works that way. So I think the depth at running backs, okay, not great, but because of the philosophy teams have taken from me, Todd, and have kind of used that.
Honestly,
a lot further than they should.
It's Monday after the Super Bowl. I'm trying to enjoy just kind of, rehashing the whole season. I'm trying to have a nice Monday here at home, and you're ruining it with nonsense. So I'm not going to be pulled in. Namaste. I'm in a happy place.
Look at this. Restrained from Todd McShay. You know what we'll do? I'll be the peacemaker here. We're going to wrap things up and move on to our guest.
That's why he backs off. I know McShay.
Like, you changed the entire league's philosophy on drafting running backs. Like,
maybe.
Oh, my goodness.
Let's just say, Todd, let me just say this. Then they finally figured it out without my help, okay? They finally figured it out on their own. Let's go. I'll say that.
Mel Kiper Jr., you're a trendsetter.
A little easier tonight?
Not just the godfather of draft coverage, but also a draft trendsetter. We'll be back in just a minute, but first, 3 times a week, you can get The Right Time with Bomani Jones, the podcast that brings you the latest from technology, music, and the very best analysis of the games. Plus, he has a community of friends, including Dominique Foxworth, for Foxworth Fridays. That's the right time with Bomani Jones, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Listen wherever you get your podcasts, and Wednesdays and Fridays podcasts are also available on ESPN's YouTube channel.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.